What the fuck is up, world? Fiali, Tlalticpac. We back in this bitch. Another podcast for that ass. Another Grito. Se ha dicho. Coming about 2 months time now since the last episode. I hope you all have been well. Your boy has been doing well as well. Right? Part of the reason why I haven't been able to drop a podcast. Things fortunately are going well enough that I've been just so preoccupied with work at the moment that, I mean, this is kind of an excuse and for reasons we'll see here shortly. But the truth is, yeah, dog, it also does take, work currently right now, is taking a lot of my time. One of the things about being a college professor is that it's, depending on the enrollments, can be, feast or famine. And right now, thankfully, in the spirit of the season, it's feast, right? So because of that, I've just been busy, dog, with work. And again, thankful for that, no doubt, right? But also probably a little bit of an excuse because obviously we all got 24/7s in a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, according to the Gregorian calendar. And because of that, I could have perhaps been more fruitful with my time off. That would have enabled me to drop another podcast more recently than the 2-month span that it's been since my last episode. But one thing that I'm starting to really appreciate as I get older, dog, I'm just divorcing myself mercifully more and more from a capitalist mode of happiness, basically. Like, what the fuck, dog? Why sugarcoat it? You know what I mean? And what I'm saying by that is that, capitalism, we've all been traumatized, dog, because that's the theme of the episode for today to an extent. Trauma, bro. It's all about trauma. But more importantly, it's all about overcoming the trauma, the strength that we have within us to overcome the trauma. What gave birth to the trauma in the first place? And one of those things that gave birth to the trauma that we all experience by virtue of simply being human beings living in the 21st century Western world is capitalism, dog. You know what I'm saying? And right now, currently, I'm still in the desocialization process from allowing capitalism to determine the value that I place on my time, my free time, and my hobbies, like dropping a podcast. Sometimes I get a little bit fucking overwhelmed with the idea that I've been podcasting this bitch for like 3 years now and that it hasn't. Okay, I gotta be very careful with how I'm gonna say this. So before I say it, I'll just say this. Shout out to all you motherfuckers that have fucking reached out in the last 2 months and be like, yo, Ice, when you dropping another potty, bro? And I'm like, yo, dog, I'm gonna get to that shit as soon as I can, homie, just because of you. Shout out to Turo on, I'm sure it's Turo, right? On Instagram. Shout out to a few other people as well. My bad. I don't mean to be dissing you. It's just, my mind kind of loses track of the people in the last 2 months that have been asking. But just know that I appreciate the fuck out of you doing so. It's really what has motivated me to do this particular episode because, as I'm saying, I'm really starting to appreciate and enjoy my downtime, and I don't constantly feel the need to be producing something in order to validate my existence. And that's the whole point of taking it back from the capitalist norms of, or what capitalists tell you is, valuable. And what they'll tell you is that there is no such thing as free time, that every single waking moment should be spent trying to produce something and monetize something. And that's kind of the point that I was getting to when I was stating before I paused to give a shout out to all you motherfuckers that listen to this bitch. And that was that, sometimes I do get the capitalist mode of production overtakes me. And I start to think to myself, like, well, I've been doing this for 3 years. I should be seeing some sort of more financial incentive than I've seen at this point. But then I take a step back and I realize, like, not everything needs to be monetized, bro. Some things can be passion projects. And the idea that you can't have that everything needs to be monetized is a uniquely fucking capitalist. I don't want to say uniquely capitalist because there's fucking hustlers out there, dog, who appreciate the grind. You know what I'm saying? But for a lot of us, something like a podcast, for me, this initially intended to be a passion project, like something I do fucking for fun. You know what I'm saying? Something that I do to share my thoughts with the world. Notably, students that I would have that would, the semester would come to an end and my students would be like, well, what's next? And I'd have to tell them, I teach at a community college, bro. I teach at community colleges mostly. And because of that, I have a very limited amount of classes that I can offer you. I can offer you an ethics, or I can offer you an introduction course to philosophy in some capacity or another. But aside from that, that's quite literally the limits to my capabilities of what a college environment will allow me, which of course was an excuse, which is why I started the podcast, because, well, now I could talk about whatever the fuck I want, whenever I want, outside of the legitimizing force of the academia. So, when my students initially, enough of them came out to me and they're like, well, what's next after this class? I've taken your intro class and I've taken your fucking ethics class, and now I want more. And it's like, well, fuck, instead of telling them I got nothing, I just say, well, listen to the podcast, bro. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying, is that it started as a passion project. And of course, if it wasn't able to, become more monetized, of course I would take it, most likely, right? But the point that I'm trying to get to is just coming to terms with the fact that, again, the free time that I have doesn't necessarily need to be directed towards making a podcast anymore, because I don't feel the impetus to fucking constantly be producing material in order to stay relevant. You know what I'm saying? To be constantly on the top of your feed every time you open up your YouTube or your, whatever podcast app that you listen to, because that's not what the fuck I'm doing this for. You know what I mean? And that's why I say a special shout out to you motherfuckers that are not only listening to it, but checking in and being like, yo, dog, when's the next podcast? Because that lets me know that I'm fucking, I'm vibrating with the people that I'm looking for. You know what I'm saying? And that's not to say that just because you haven't reached out and asked where the next podcast is, that this isn't for you, so much as it is to say that for the casual listener of a podcast, the person who's just, flipping through their iTunes at any given moment looking for something else to deaden the silence, this is probably not for them, because it's not consistent enough for that. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to allow those people to determine what I do with my free time, because ultimately the point that I was trying to get to is that free time is very meditative in nature. And that's something that I'm really starting to learn to appreciate from, as I delve deeper into these ancestral teachings, into the now, just essentially the Nawa cosmology, bro. And, that is the idea that meditation is not just this practice of you sitting there like fucking Rikishi in The Lion King, you know what I'm saying? With your eyes closed and humming some mantras. Like, I'm sure that's definitely part of it. But meditation can also be other things, dog, like sleeping, like just not fucking doing anything, sitting on the couch and just staring and inward, hopefully. But also, if you're vegging on social media, maybe a little bit of that too. You know what I'm saying? Meditation can be flowing at jujitsu, flow rolling at jujitsu, rolling in general at jujitsu. Meditation, essentially the point that I'm trying to get to, can be anything that eases us, eases our minds. You know what I'm saying? To which, again, for me, in many ways, this podcast does. So again, learning to appreciate not only the fact that not everything needs to be produced and, monetized, but also appreciating the fact that I'm podcasting for a very specific group of people. The people that are actually fucking interested in hearing what it is, thankfully, for what it is that I have to say. You know what I mean? So I wasn't, as this 2-month break unfolded, I wasn't necessarily pressed. And I found this to be very relaxing, by the way. But I wasn't necessarily pressed on trying to produce a podcast as quickly as possible, because, again, a lot of that comes from the capitalist means of mode of production that's in all of us. And my understanding, for instance, of how podcasts work, that if you don't consistently pump them out, you're not going to stay relevant, because the people who are listening and digesting the episodes, they're going to just skip on to the next thing in order to just keep their entertainment going, right? So I had to make a conscientious decision to, again, decide, like, that's not my crowd. That's not for me. My folks are the ones that are going to listen fucking 2 months after I drop a podcast, because they're interested in hopefully the content as opposed to the amount of episodes I'm dropping, right? And it's not just me, dog. And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to get to ultimately with this long-winded ass introduction. And that is that I'm basically, again, I'm just trying to relay my life experiences and hoping, it's not even a word, hoping that they will, inspire within you some sort of thought that can help uncover this similar feeling that I'm trying to convey to you. And that is, however it is, it relates to your specific circumstances, because I don't know what your circumstances are. Like, I'd love to know, you know what I mean? Reach out to me, holler at your boy, OG_IceNice13 on the gram. You see how organically that shit was, dog? I didn't force it this time at all, right? I slipped it right in. But yeah, like, share, dog. Reach out, holler at your boy. Let me know. Like, this is what I do on my free time, bro. You know what I'm saying? And ultimately, then the point that I'm trying to get to is that hopefully this introduction that I've given so far, again, just me relaying my thoughts and sending them out to the world to whoever wants to fuck with them, right? Inspires the thought within you to uncover a similar truth, a similar feeling. And that is just how much ultimately, dog, as I'm going to show, hopefully, as this bitch unfolds, and that is to just truly appreciate this fucking moment that we have. You know what I'm saying? And not allow these external forces that are constantly driving all of us, you included, to act out of pocket when we should realistically just be appreciating the opportunity to even be in that position in the first place. And of course, what I mean by act out of pocket is not like act all crazy and shit, but just acting in a way that allows external forces to influence our internal reaction, just our internal being, dog. You know what I'm saying? For me, and the example of the podcast and, oh my God, I got to monetize this podcast, which means I have to drop an episode every week in order to stay relevant. Like, that's just one part of me and within me that's motivated by external forces. We all wear different hats. We all play different roles. And the point that I'm trying to state here is that trying to take stock of all these different roles and the overlying effect that they have within us. Some of y'all motherfuckers are students, as well as being parents and workers and husbands and wives and, sons and daughters, etc. And you're trying to fucking monetize you're trying to survive a capitalist system. Like, that's a lot of hats to wear, bro. That's a lot of fucking external impetus that demands a level of joy, essentially, that can demand, let me be very clear with what I'm trying to say, that can demand a certain level of joy being removed from this experience of life. And that if we don't take stock of that, it's probably not going to be the most pleasurable life, despite all the external satisfaction that we gain in doing so. You know what I mean? If we're not actually enjoying the process, if we're not actually enjoying any of it, well, what the fuck is the point of it? You know what I'm trying to say? So that's kind of the long-winded, that's the ultimate conclusion to that long-winded introductory rant of where it is that I've been, why it is that I've been there, and hopefully one of the takeaways it's not hopefully one of the takeaways, it is one of the takeaways that I've taken from this time off. And hopefully it's, been delivered to you and conveyed in such a way that it can inspire within you. Again, once more, the thoughts that will be, the catalyst for you coming to similar truths as well, assuming you already haven't. You know what I'm saying? Before I continue along, I should clearly state, by the way, that this was an idea that was awakened within me by way, as I mentioned briefly, of all the ancestral Nawa philosophy classes that I don't even know what to call it, bro. I'll just call it like ancestral teachings. To call it philosophy would be so reductive because philosophy, as understood, is not vast enough a word to encapsulate what it is that, the knowledge our ancestors had to share. Not because they themselves weren't philosophers, but because, again, the teachings are so far beyond just philosophy, is what I'm trying to say, right? Anyways, this idea that I have that I just shared with you was one that was motivated, or it was, again, awakened within me by some of those teachings, bro. And specifically one of those teachings coming to us by way of a class that I'm currently taking on our sacred Tezcatlipoca, which, before I even get into it, I should state probably came out there's a few things I should state. First is I would highly encourage you that if Tezcatlipoca is something that is calling to you, that you search out ancestral sources of the knowledge of Tezcatlipoca, because this is coming from somebody who, everybody has a Tezcatlipoca, dog. Everybody's got a sacred Tezcatlipoca, right? It's basically a subconscious. And that's the most absolute reductive way of explaining it, which is why I mentioned earlier, by the way, that, philosophy is not a good enough word to explain what we're learning. And that's because just using this word, for example, subconscious, that's a term that comes to us by way of Western psychiatry, which it doesn't even begin to encapsulate what it is that our ancestors taught us of Tezcatlipoca. So that's why, I hesitated to even call it philosophy. It's the same reason I hesitate to call Tezcatlipoca subconscious, but for lack of my better ability to articulate the idea properly, which is why you should seek out the indigenous sources, if that's something you're interested in, I just use the word subconscious to, relay that idea. But anyways, like I was stating, if the Tezcatlipoca, the sacred Tezcatlipoca is calling out to you, it's not by accident. We all have a sacred Tezcatlipoca, right? But more importantly, the reason why I continue to emphasize of learning it from our ancestral sources is because I know me personally, Tezcatlipoca has spoken to me for a very long time now. My Tezcatlipoca has spoken to me for a very long time now. But I'm only now, within the last month or so, starting to understand what that truly means. And part of that was because I sought non-indigenous sources of knowledge for what a Tezcatlipoca was. And I'm not going to say that they're not entirely wrong. They've got like small little bits and pieces that they get correctly, like the sacred mirror. Tezcatlipoca has the sacred mirror, right? But there's fucking so much of it that they get just flat out wrong or just don't understand correctly. And they basically are teaching it from a Western lens that it just does it no service. So for instance, from some of the readings just off the top that I remember learning from the Tezcatlipoca, what Western academics tell us is that, that they used to sit people in front of a smoking mirror and that it would, was a metaphor for, the clouded experience of our subconscious, which again, it's not entirely false, but you don't need a philosopher. You don't need like the Lamatinis and the Temactianis, they help, you know what I mean? Don't get me twisted. But all that knowledge is within us, dog. All that knowledge is ready to be discovered within us. It's not in a mirror outside of us. We are the fucking smoking mirror. You know what I'm saying? That's why I kept on using the language earlier. Like, I hope the words that I've spoken have helped awaken within you, or rather helped inspire within you the ideas that will awaken the truth as you uncover them, right? So that's just one small example of the Tezcatlipoca, of how I personally mistook it for the longest time. And it wasn't until literally like a month ago that I started taking this class on our sacred Tezcatlipoca that I'm only now starting to really understand and appreciate what it really is, right? It's not a god. It's not it's not the god of night like we're told. It's none of that, dog. I mean, the night plays a figurative role in it, but again, when you think of it as a god of night, you think of it like some Mortal Kombat Raiden character or some ancient Greek mythology type shit, and that's just absolutely not what it is, right? Perhaps a more appropriate approximation of what it could be. Now, because again, I'm not the expert. I'm still learning this shit, but this is me relaying to you the ideas that I've had in learning this. And it's that which sees us without eyes. It's that which hears us without ears. You know what I mean? It literally is it's our inner self, but not in this soul type of way, not in this conscient noumena, personal self type of way. It's something completely different, dog. And again, this is not the episode for sure, and I'm certainly not the source that's qualified to discuss it, but it just gets so deep into our genetic being, our literal genetic makeup, and how that genetic makeup has existed since time immemorial and how it will continue to exist long after we exist. And how that genetic memory, the egg cell and the sperm, for instance, they were driven by some force, a dynamite, animating force, and that animating force created something, out of what was once, just genetic memory from, again, time immemorial. So not even speaking of your human ancestors now, I'm speaking about fucking the lizard ancestors and before, dog, of human beings. You know what I'm saying? And then it's that dynamizing force that eventually comes to give birth to what would become, and again, I'm butchering it terribly, but the basic idea is our sacred Tezcatlipoca, right? And one of the things, so the class that I'm taking is called Meditations on Tezcatlipoca. And the reason being is because, again, it's just circumventing around the idea of not only trauma, recovery, but in this particular sense, meditation and the role meditation ultimately plays in recovering from the trauma, right? In this case, then, we're meditating with our sacred Tezcatlipoca. We're learning to commune. We're learning to communicate with ourselves, with the self within us that has existed from time immemorial, with the self within us that contains within all sorts of knowledge and potentialities, not just in terms now of what you can potentially do in life, but in terms of like the actual tonal powali, the Nawa count of days, which tells us you have the energy of an eagle, of a condor, of an ocelot, of a coyote, right, of an alligator, all kinds of different, there's 20 of them, but 20 different forces that, our ancestors recognized in life and, attributed certain qualities of that creature to the facets of life that we live through and say, you have this within you, right? So it's not even potentialities like in terms of now what you can potentially do in life if you just follow X, Y, and Z path, like the American dream, for example. But potentialities, like honestly, the cosmology of life, dog, that exists within us, that has been manifested by way, again, of these creatures that our ancestors, reduced to a calendar and, created a Tonalpohualli and said, this is this particular characteristic trait. And we all have it within us by virtue of the 280 days of pregnancy, which is the exact days in the ancestral calendars, right? And then you add more to it in order to approximate closer to 365. That's a tangent, by the way. But anyways, the idea being is that we have all these potentialities within us, and our goal is to learn how to activate them at any given moment so that we can become the person that we were intended to be. And in this particular case, the person that we are intended to be is the person that our community needs us to be, right? So again, this is just getting into a little bit deeper of what a little bit of how the ancestral culture worked. But, when people in their community in the past recognized the need for a certain role to be filled, they had made very conscientious efforts to not only try to conceive during this time where they knew a certain, tonal would be born, like say you needed an ocelot, right? And because ocelots have all sorts of characteristic traits that I can't recall them off the top of my head right now, but maybe in a future episode I'll discuss it. But the idea is you need an ocelot at this particular time to help the community because they embody certain characteristics of the ocelot, right? And you birth that person essentially into existence, and then you train that person to be, to fill this role, and then you name that person accordingly. And then as they mature into life, they become that person that their community desires, right? So when it comes to this, whole reflection on Tezcatlipoca, then the part of it is, learning to communicate within ourselves so that we not only learn how we have all these energies within us, the ocelot, the cuscuatli, the condor, right? All that kind of stuff. But also so that we can learn what it is that the role that we're here for, and specifically the role that we play in our community. You know what I mean? Help unpolish that truth within us so that we can manifest, I don't want to say manifest because that's like fucking new age hipsterdom bullshit. But so that, the word is manifest. So irrespective of the new age hipster shit, right? Like the word still is manifest, but I hate to use it because it's associated with like the secret and all that kind of stuff, right? But in this case, I'm speaking of manifest as to actually make happen, right? The reason that we're here in the community. And this, of course, is something that our sacred Tezcatlipoca can help, orient us towards. But it's, it does come with a little bit of a drawback, bro. And the drawback is that our sacred Tezcatlipoca also has, I don't want to say good or evil because this doesn't exist in ancestral Nahuatl thought, not as the way Christians thought of good and evil, okay? But this Tezcatlipoca, they call it, that which giveth and that kind of, this is not exact words, by the way. So again, I got to continue to emphasize, seek this knowledge from its ancestral source. But the basic gist is the sacred Tezcatlipoca was something that which was called like that which gives, but it also takes, okay? And the reason being is because the Tezcatlipoca, it's not inherently good or bad. It just is, right? And it exists within all of us. And the reason I emphasize this is because it's very easy to, it's very easy to attribute good shit to, positive traits to things, when good things happen. But it's also very easy to wrongly attribute negative traits to that very same thing, like the Tezcatlipoca when it happened. You know what I'm saying? And what I'm trying to state here specifically, and this is like actual relaying of the ancestral wisdom, and that is that you have to be careful when you're swimming in these waters, dog, of these Tezcatlipocas. Not because you should be afraid per se, but because you're opening up a lot of, there's a lot of darkness within every single one of us, homie. Simply put, you know what I'm saying? I know I've used this metaphor on this podcast before, but every time I speak of it, it's the first thing that comes to mind because, I don't know, I'm the fucking nerd dork. I don't fucking know, right? But it's the forest in Harry Potter, like the dark forbidden forest. You cannot go in there, especially as first years, because you as first years do not have the fucking experience necessary to navigate and potentially survive it. And that's kind of the same idea when it comes to, diving into these waters of the sacred Tezcatlipoca. And that is that you're gonna reflect, you're going to meditate, and you're going to be speaking with yourself. And there are some things within you that are very they're scary, dog, and they're hidden away in the dark for a reason. You know what I'm saying? And again, this is kind of starting to orient us towards the whole purpose of meditation and, ultimate trauma, and how the meditation can serve in the recovery from the trauma. And that is that, once you start to familiarize yourself with this Tezcatlipoca, dog, we are not isolated beings that just came out of nowhere. We weren't fucking carrots that were, uprooted from the ground. And even carrots aren't oblivious to this Tezcatlipoca, because even carrots their entire existence is predicated off genetic memory, genetic sequencing. You know what I'm saying? So the reason why I qualified is because not only are we directly influenced by our material conditions that we were born into. So me personally, for example, and I'm sure the same is true of you, I am only here in 2023, El Paso, Texas, because of the choices my ancestors made that converged onto this particular, into this particular moment that gave, that enabled my birth, right? So my grandparents deciding to leave Mexico and come into United States of America, the primary example. They didn't fucking just out of nowhere decide to do that. They were literally forced out of their ancestral land by capitalism. And in an effort to survive capitalism, they came to the United States, which is where my mom met my dad. And then boom, here I am. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean by the material conditions. But we're also influenced by our genetic fucking circumstances, which is obvious at first glance, right? But with what I'm trying to tell you with this sacred Tezcatlipoca is that our genetic memory, our genetic sequencing comes with a genetic memory, again, from time immemorial. So before even the fucking lizard peoples that we all were at once, right? The single-celled organisms, the things that existed at the conception of the universe, the stardust, essentially, right? Like all that is genetic memory that we possess within us. This whole notion that we are star stuff, we are the universe experiencing itself. Yes, but it's also still vastly limited to explain what it is that our ancestors are telling us. Like the sacred animating force that was at the birth of the universe, that was driving the birth of the universe, the actual birth of the universe itself is stored within us in our genetic memory, which is great when you're thinking about it in this vast cosmological sense. But it's a little bit of a fucking bummer when you consider it within the last 500 years of history, because what it's telling you is that all that shit that our ancestors survived and experienced by way of a fucking attempted genocide, that shit is within our genetic code. It's within our genetic sequencing. Everything that every single one of our progenitors did up to our parents, right? Good and bad, that's in their genetic memory, and it's passed on to us, right? And those genetic memories, they can be fucking activated, very real. And the responses that we have to them can be very, impactful to our everyday lives. So this is what I'm talking about when I speak of what our ancestors were speaking of when they talk about how you got to be careful with how we navigate this sacred Tezcatlipoca, because yes, there's a vast amount of great information in there, but there's a lot of terrifying shit in there, dog. And that's just speaking of the ancestral memory. You can add on to that because every single person that exists, they contribute to this memory, right? So now you can even add on to that memory your experiences here on Earth. You know what I'm saying? Here on this slippery earth of Tlalticpac. And I'm sure some of them are going to be good, great even. But some of them are also going to be highly traumatic, dog. And when you start to speak to Tezcatlipoca, those memories are right there, right? Good and bad. Is one thing that, a very recurring theme in these classes that we're teaching is don't just proliferate indigenous suffering. You have to be able to proliferate the indigenous accomplishment as well. Yes, we got genocided, but we survived the genocide type shit. You know what I'm saying? Same concept here unfolding with the Tezcatlipoca. Like, yes, it can take, but it can also give. You know what I mean? Just, you have to be very careful with the way that you're navigating these waters. But ultimately, this is something you have to do. Notice, it's not whether, okay, I take it back. It's not a have to do. They're not making a normative claim, and I'm not going to make one for them being our ancestors, and normative being in like, you have to do this. Like, no, it's not a matter of what you have to do or not. If you want to live completely, without any sort of connection to this philosophy, more power to you. If you don't want to converse with your inner Tezcatlipoca, your sacred Tezcatlipoca, or whatever it is that your society culture refers to it as, more power to you. You don't have to fucking do anything. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm also saying is that if you do want to do that, you have to be very careful because, not only do you have to be very careful because of what can potentially come from it, but you probably also should do that because we're all here for a reason, whether we know it or not, essentially, right? We're all brought to this fucking slippery existence for a reason. And, it would be nice to be able to know what that reason was because, we had connection to our ancestral past. And your mom and dad, for instance, could tell you, mijo, mija, we brought you here to, Tlalticpac because we needed a X, Y, and Z. We needed a fucking ozomatli. We needed a ocelot. We needed a sipactli, an alligator, right? And this is why you were here because you have a purpose to play to the community and to help uplift the community and continue perpetuating its growth and development because the universe is literally all about continued growth and development. It's literally the fucking animating force that I keep talking about, right? But most of us, unfortunately, don't have that. And I know I certainly don't have that, didn't have that because of the material conditions that I was born into. I was born in the fucking hood, dog. Hood philosophy, right? In the mid 1980s, El Paso, Texas. What does that mean? It means that I was born into a Chicano culture, Mexican American, that is fucking indigenous in descent, right? I don't want to say in descent because that means we're not connected to we're indigenous, right? But as a Chicanx person, I was born here in the United States of America, again, in the mid 1980s, in the hood. So what does that mean? It means that I was born into fucking abject poverty to teenager parents, one of them who was a heroin addict. And because of that, I've never met him and he's dead now. So I never will meet him. Okay. And the other one being my mom, who was 17 years old when she had me and still graduated high school. Kudos to her. Right. But as an 18-year-old was not fucking fit, simply put, to raise a child, not in this capitalist society, because she was in many ways a child herself. And that is not a knock on my mother per se, so much as it is, again, a conscientious understanding of the historical material conditions that we find ourselves living in. So then the question becomes, why is that important? And the reason, of course, is now after 36, almost 37 years on this bitch, on this slippery earth of Tlalticpac, I'm starting to slowly understand, and it's becoming more and more evident to me with my reflections, with my sacred Tezcatlipoca, that the reason why I'm here is to fucking share this information, quite simply. Now, I say quite simply, but obviously it's never really that simple. You know what I'm saying? The reality is, as I've mentioned before on this bitch, our ancestors didn't take isolated incidents. There's no such thing. Everything happens for a reason, which is why I know me personally, I confidently can say, whether the ancestors would agree with this or not, this is my belief. Every single person is here, born here, descends here to Tlalticpac for a reason, right? And part of the parcels of philosophy is to discover that reason, in my opinion, right? You converse with the sacred Tezcatlipoca so you can discover, this, by the way, is the ancestral part, discover what that reason could be, right? So as much as I want to just reduce it and say, it's quite simple, like I'm just here to teach the message, it's really not that simple, right? And the reason why is because I'm trying to consider the best way to broach this topic, because I'm not trying to give you again the impression of like, oh, I'm so special, look at me. No, fuck that, dude. Like, yes, I am special, but so are you. All right. So the point that I'm trying to get to, I guess, before I dive into this topic, is that this is just me relaying to you. I'm relaying the message in hopes that it resonates again enough so that it could, help you reveal the truth within you. But I'm using my personal example because, well, fuck, I don't know yours, right? Like I don't have no another personal example. I don't have another example to give. But the point then being is that what I'm experiencing, you are too. You can potentially experience as well. That's why, our ancestors used to say, your head hurts me, because they knew everything is everything, dog. You are me and I am you. Everything that I'm experiencing, you've either experienced or will experience or can potentially experience. You know what I'm saying? So even though I'm using myself, please understand that it's not coming from a point of, me trying to bloviate and fucking self-flatulate myself essentially. Like, no, dog, I'm just relaying my example because fuck, this is how the nature of this works, right? So anyways, with that qualification out of the way, the point that I'm trying to make is that it's not just as simple as coming up here and just delivering the message, right? Because honestly, I know this has been my experience for sure, but whenever you meet people who, are trying to profess some shit that they're not really connected to, you can sense it. Like, this person is not being genuine. This person is being very disingenuous with me, and it's coming across in their message. And because of that, I'm really not interested in what they have to say, because fuck these motherfuckers faking the funk straight up. Why are they trying to fucking hoodwink me for? Just to keep it 100 with you, right? And that's how I would probably react. That's why I don't really fuck with Jordan Peterson. I could, for one, I have the knowledge of all the stuff that he's talking about. So I'm just like, well, you're doing that wrong. You're doing this wrong, right? And more importantly, because I already know, like what you said, like we study this. It's philosophy, right? But more importantly, like he's detached from the message. He's not sincere. And despite all the tears that he cries, those are fake tears. He's a huckster, dog. You know what I mean? And because of that, I've never really resonated with him. For me personally, I'm not knocking those that do, right? Because I think the message that he's speaking is important. I just don't think he's the one that should be saying it, right? I think he also knows that it's important, which is why he started saying it, because he fucking wanted to capitalize off of that message, because he recognized that it is a good message and the need for it today, right? And what I don't think is that he's sincere and genuine in his in his intentions of applying that message, right? Just to be explicitly clear. Anyway, so I guess the whole point of that then is to emphasize rather the fact that if a person is disconnected from the message that they are trying to spread, it comes across. You can notice it. You pick that shit up, right? Which would then imply for me that in order to speak about the things that I'm speaking about, well, I would naturally have to experience these things, right? And by the way, this is one of those things that I'm very conflicted with when it comes to Chicano culture in general. It's on the up, dog. It really is. And it's beautiful to see because it's a beautiful culture. And I'm not just saying that because I myself am a Chicano, but even before I understood what it meant to be a Chicano, I was always drawn towards it, partly because of the aesthetics of it. It's a very beautiful culture. The lowriders, the tattoos, all that kind of shit. This is me doing the lowrider movement, not me fucking, right, pretending someone's flatulating me. But it's just a beautiful culture is what I'm trying to say. For those of you who are listening only, I'm doing like the hand down to the dick area. You know what I'm saying? So I could see how you would think like it's for fucking pretending someone's giving them head. Nah, dog, it's the lowrider, right? Anyways, yeah, so the aesthetics of it are very appealing. And because of that, I see, and I'm sure you have as well, the proliferation of Chicano culture around the world. And some of the most obvious examples being in Asia. Asian foods love Chicano culture, which again, part of me thinks it's beautiful, right? But another part of me is like, bro, you are not qualified to be spreading this message. I'm sorry, but you're just not. Actually learning this lesson was very, very powerful to me when it came to learning to understand and respect the importance of our connected indigenous relatives, I guess, for lack of a better term, the quote unquote real natives, right? As opposed to quote unquote fake natives like myself, because I'm detribalized tier, right? But they got a point. And the point here is that when you have motherfuckers who are LARPing essentially what it means to be a Native American, it's fucking highly offensive, because even though, us detribalized folks, or worse yet, completely non-indigenous connected people are out there wearing fucking headdresses and shit, like, yeah, dog, they're going to see that. And knowing the significance of it, they have every right to be upset about it. You know what I mean? And I didn't really appreciate that. And I didn't really understand that until I started seeing it as well with the Chicano culture. And it's like, I'm not trying to compare the Chicano struggle, by the way, to indigenous struggle, specifically in this respect, because what the fuck is Chicano culture? It's like 50 years old. You can't relate that to indigenous culture. That's nonsense. Okay. The indigenous culture from all over Turtle Island clearly will take precedence in terms of historicity. Right. I'm not saying that the indigenous culture is not important, or rather Chicano culture is unimportant. I'm just saying that it's a fucking baby compared to some of these indigenous cultures. You know what I mean? So that's the point that I'm trying to make. Anyways, before I kind of struggled and I was like, well, dog, we're indigenous too. Like, why the fuck are you gatekeeping? Why are you keeping us out? Why are you telling us this and that? And the answer is because they should be. Honestly, like, and I started to realize this when it came to the Chicano motherfuckers that are out there around the world, who are paying homage, I guess, to the culture by replicating it, but who don't really have any understanding of where this culture came from, right? And that's kind of the point that I was trying to get to when I stated that my point was here to deliver this message. And the message is, of course, again, from a Chicano born in 1980s El Paso, Texas, who grew up in the hood, in crime and poverty, drug-infested community, no fucking family, nuclear family outside of my grandparents and, cousins who eventually became my siblings, because fuck what European people think a brother and sister is, right? And now is philosophizing in such a way that I'm hoping will serve my purpose to the community. What is my purpose to the community? The hood philosophy, dog, to understand the ways in which navigating all of these, obstacles of growing up in the hood impact people, bro. And the very real effect that they have on our overall lives. Why? So in the hopes of spreading this fucking philosophy that doing so will, dynamize thoughts and ideas inside the people who are listening to reflect on their own upbringing, perhaps, and recognize all the ways in which the waters are being blocked within us, right? Water's sacred, homie. The water needs to flow through us. And a lot of, a huge part of growing up in the hood implies that we build these walls, we build up these dams that keep the waters, whether they be emotional, spiritual, attitudinal, etc., from flowing. And because of that, we become very stagnant people. And this is not good, in my opinion, and personal experience, by the way, because ultimately what it means then is that it's limiting us from being able to live the good life that we are capable of. You know what I'm saying? So, I spread this philosophy in the hopes that doing so will help break down those walls, not only within myself and the dams within myself, but within those of you who are listening as well. How does this relate to the Chicano foos in fucking Japan? Dog, this is an insight that this comes from growing up in the hood. Like I appreciate you motherfuckers out there lowriding and keeping the culture alive, right? But you have something to offer too, probably that is centered around your cultural experience. And by LARPing essentially to be a Chicano, you're not really doing that. You know what I'm saying? Now, I should be clear that Japanese culture has offered so much to the world, far beyond the fucking weebs that we have to deal with here, right, in the United States. But it's offered so much, especially in terms of culture. And I'm not saying that you haven't done that. What I'm saying is that you're probably a little bit disconnected from the message of the Chicaneity. You know what I mean? And as much as I appreciate motherfuckers who are keeping the culture alive, because again, it's a beautiful culture. It's not that it's not really. Let me take that part back. I just have to question whether, that's what I don't know, man. I was going to say that's what your sacred Tezcatlipoca is speaking to you. But then even then it's like, maybe it is. Fuck, how do I know? You know what I'm saying? And that's all part of the meditative process, I guess, ultimately that I'm trying to get to with this whole Chicaneity. Maybe they do find in the Chicano culture, something that allows them to express themselves, right? In a unique way. I don't know, man. It's such a complex issue for me that I can't really begin to I can, obviously I'm trying to, but it's just such a complex issue that I can't even I struggle to even broach it from the most faithful way possible. I say faithful because, dog, like I practice a little bit of Japanese culture. So it's like jujitsu, right? So it's like, on the one hand, it's an impetus to wants to gatekeep. And on the other hand, it's an impetus to want to recognize that your head hurts me at the same time. I don't know, man. It's fucking complicated. I guess just the point is it's meditations with our sacred Tezcatlipoca, right? And that doing so helps reveal to us the reasons why we descended to Tlalticpac, essentially. That's just me paraphrasing, just to be clear. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make with, highlighting these LARPing foos, people that I consider perhaps wrongfully to be LARPing Chicanos, right, is to just question whether or not that's the reason why they, descended to Tlalticpac. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't fucking know, right? All I know is that circling back around to that was kind of a tangent. My apologies. In circling back to the whole point that was for this episode, and that is the, trauma recovery and the meditative practices, is that in, emphasizing the importance of engaging with our sacred Tezcatlipoca so that we could fucking work through and navigate the trauma essentially that is keeping us from living these fulfilled lives, which to me, the reason why I'm so protective of the Chicano culture is because having been through it, having raised through it, specifically the Cholo culture, having been raised through it, I feel as though it's offered a unique insight. And I'm not mad that other people would try to fucking copy it, but I'm saying I'm questioning the authenticity, I guess, of it because, unless you were there, you really don't know what you're talking about type shit, you know what I mean? But ultimately at the same time, and this is the point that I'm trying to get to, that doesn't mean that the knowledge and the information can't be of benefit. You didn't have to grow up in the hood in the 1980s, early 90s, mid 90s of El Paso, Texas, in amidst Cholo culture to reap the benefits of what the insights have to be from it, right? That come from it. You could use those insights as well to deal with your own shit. And that's the point that I'm trying to get to, right? As opposed to, seeking other forms of external validation, I guess, to avoid having to do so, right? I guess the central point, dog, to further, I just really want to be really clear that the reasons why I'm saying this, I'm properly conveying them, right? This is, again, such a new concept to me that I naturally struggle, of course, because I'm still formulating these thoughts, to properly articulate it in a way that sounds, I don't know, man. It's not that I don't want to be exclusionary, but it's not that I want to be exclusionary, right? I just want to be as faithful to this shit as possible, okay? And what I'm trying to state that, and this is just one example, by the way, the Chicano foos. Because like I said, I've done this in many ways. I still do it in many ways. And people do it in a multitude of different ways with all kinds of cultures. It's, again, I'm conscientious of this as a jiu-jitsu practitioner every time I fucking just do the action because, again, it was created by Japanese people. You know what I mean? Bowing, that's not in our culture. You know what I mean? So I recognize that I do this in a lot of ways too. You know what I mean? Chicano foos, Mexican Americans specifically, because I don't think any fucking Chicano would ever do this, but Mexican American foos using the fucking N-bomb. You know what I mean? Like adapting or trying to adapt as much of black culture as possible. Like, I don't know, man. It's just, I hate to be one of those social justice progressive fucks, but this is not what that is. All right. What this is like me trying to relate the understanding that within us, there is a voice that speaks to us of what we are, right? To quote Nietzsche, what does your conscience say to you? Become who you are. You know what I'm saying? But as I mentioned multiple times, Nietzsche's just a fucking confused Nawa, dog. There's some motherfucker that happened to be born in Germany, but realistically, in all his grand ideas that he allegedly created was not doing nothing more than discovering Nawa philosophy, right? And so when it comes to this particular example, the idea is that like it's a little bit about asking to respect it, right? But to be fair, this same critique is not just what I'm trying to state directed towards, Asian foos pretending to be Chicanos. Because there's Chicano foos, Mexican American foos that pretend to be Chicanos too, right? These quote unquote Aztec foos that claim to be Aztec warriors and all this kind of shit. But when it comes time to apply the actual real Nahua ancestral philosophy, want nothing to do with it. And the reason being is because our, sacred Tezcatlipoca is, gives and takes. And what does it take? It takes a lot of fucking courage for one. It literally takes a lot of courage on our end to delve into those waters and see why am I a fucking, the person that I am. I'll focus now on the Mexican American community, specifically those that are relevant to hood philosophy, and it's the Cholos. As I've mentioned before in the past, I always had a very contentious relationship with Cholos, and part of that was because of my view that they weren't really, they are tough in many instances. Some of them pretending to be tough, right? But some of them, most of them, absolutely tough people, but not for reasons that uplifted our community. And that's kind of the whole fucking point of what I've been trying to tell you this whole ancestral shit was about. It's about finding our role in our community so that we could fill that role and serve to uplift the community further. You know what I mean? And a lot of my disdain, even though I didn't have the language to articulate it or the knowledge even to properly articulate it back in the day towards, Cholos in our Chicano culture, was because I felt as though they weren't doing that. In fact, they were doing the exact opposite. They were keeping us from advancing as a culture. The Chicano culture in this particular instance, right? Not all of them, but a lot, the prison culture Cholos for sure. Like those motherfuckers, that got, too wrapped up in the banging our set shit. Like, nah, dog, you guys are you're missing the point. You're doing the culture a disservice. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's not just these isolated incidents. It's just one that I was thinking about, and I have more thoughts about it too. But I'll save that about the Asian foods for a different podcast, because this isn't one to get into it. Right? The one for this one was just speaking again to the role of our sacred Tezcatlipoca and the effect that it has on our lives, and us coming to the understanding of the role that we are supposed to play in this life. Right? Again, scary, terrifying process. For me, no exception. In full disclosure, one of the other reasons why, besides the, famine or feast rather, that we're currently experiencing with enrollment, famine was during the fucking COVID pandemic, bro. That shit was rough as a college professor. It was rough for everybody, right? But enrollment wise, it was fucking rough. Right now, feast. Anyways, another reason though, beyond just the feast at work is, I'm not fucking perfect. I'm not a whole individual. I'm sure you've picked this up, and I try to be as fucking forthcoming with this as possible. I have a lot of shortcomings, dog. A lot of my own personal shortcomings that I'm still trying to deal with that directly impact my ability, or perhaps better stated, my inability to consistently podcast, to consistently train jujitsu, to consistently lift weights, to consistently, be a better, more importantly than all of those things, to be a better father, to be a better partner, to be a better, family member. Like, I have all of these things that keep me from being able to do that, because again, I'm not an actualized person. I'm just trying to be one. You know what I mean? And because of that, those things occasionally, they get the best of me. And one of the benefits that I found from Nawa philosophy, because as I mentioned before at very early episodes of this podcast, part of the reason why I even started philosophizing in the first place was to try to find answers to that. You know what I mean? Which is why I was initially a psychology major, right? But I needed answers. I need to find answers for those actions so I could try to live a better life. And then I discovered Nawa philosophy, and it's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. This makes so much more sense than what the fuck the European people are telling me. So I get enmeshed into this. And the benefit of it being that it has given me a better roadmap to understand those issues, as well as to try to, escape them. But the fact of the matter is, dog, I'm still heavily, heavily plagued by those issues. And they have a very direct impact on my life. And, a lot of this I attribute to the negative programming that we endured by way of the Western culture, the Western Christian world. Like, this, it is what it is. And specifically when it comes to institutional learning facilities, it's one of the reasons why I really do believe like this is the path that I'm on for a reason, right? All the suffering, I'm okay with it. And this is an ancestral Nawa truth, dog. We seek the suffering because the suffering is what makes us stronger. We become stronger for it. You know what I mean? We should purposely, whenever we're trying to level up, purposely look for struggle, because through the struggle is how we, level up. Again, our ancestors, the Nawa, are not the only people that have discovered this. Others have as well, right? But it's definitely a core tenet of their philosophy. Cosmology. So how it relates to this is simple. Like, I don't necessarily mind the suffering anymore because, I find it for a reason. What's the reason? To help do this, to help offer up these flowers to you. What are the flowers? The philosophy that I'm hoping that, again, I got to continue to reiterate, will hopefully inspire within you the ideas that, awaken within you and help you reveal this truth to you. The truth here being the feeling that I experience, right? Because your head hurts me and I want my head to hurt you as well, right? That sounds very fucking sexual, but the point being, like, mi cabeza way, right? Not my head, as in my head game. That's disgusting. Don't even go there, right? Don't even think about that. Try to keep it as philosophically relevant as possible. Anyways, so, yeah, dog. And the point that I'm trying to state then is that it's through this suffering, which we reveal to ourselves with honest reflection and, put aside all of the pretense, whether it be Chicano culture, whether it be jiu-jitsu culture, all that kind of shit, to get to the source of who we are, and then try to manifest that source of what we are, that essence of what we are, to help bring it to the community, to uplift it. How do we uplift it? By offering these flowers. What are the flowers that I'm going to leave you in closing with? It is the role that these systematic institutional learning facilities have played to help perpetuate this colonial project that basically laid the foundation for this Western world, which is a world It's a diseased world, dog. The Western world is diseased. It's sick. It's fucking dying, more importantly, which is a great thing because it's not a good culture. Okay. I do not care what anybody says. You know what I mean? I don't fucking owe this country or this culture anything. This country and this culture has created the conditions, the socioeconomic, the material conditions, historical material conditions that led to this very moment and this very fucking thing that I'm about to tell you. And that is that, you know, it's not the best. It could be better. And part of that being better is by acknowledging that it's diseased and, you know, fucking dying in the first place. But more importantly, filling our role that we have to play in order to build this new, better world, which is ultimately, and fucking final set in closing, the reason why I look skeptically at people when we're living inauthentically, myself included. You know what I mean? Like, as much as I would love to just mope around all day and be a shitty fucking sad person, I know that I cannot do that. I know because, I mean, I could, but then I would be that fucking cholo that I was talking about earlier that isn't helping advance our culture. You know what I mean? I could be that person living in bad faith and pretending to be another thing that I'm not, but then I'm not fulfilling the purpose that I was built here, that I was put here, that I came here for, right? And in doing so, I'm not helping to build this better world that we can have, which is a tragedy because as somebody, like I'm sure you too, who has to navigate the trauma inherent with living in this modern world can attest to, it's fucking shitty, man. And I hate the idea of not only other people like myself, my current, you know, demographic, experiencing this, like the idea that you're suffering in similar ways to the ways that I'm suffering, and that a large part of that are predicated on a culture that we could easily change. That's hurtful. You know what I mean? But nowhere near as hurtful as knowing that future generations can suffer as well, perhaps needlessly, because as I mentioned, suffering, not necessarily a bad thing, but needless suffering, that's a different story. And in this case, it would be needless because perhaps people like myself didn't have the strength to be able to manifest the reasons that we're here. And because of that, we did not create the world that would have been more, you know, conducive to those that are coming after us, the future ancestors, to allow them to thrive and to enjoy life, right? And ultimately, this is, in my behalf, in my belief, a failure on, you know, my behalf and the behalf of every person that isn't working to, you know, manifest their purpose, because the whole purpose of life, again, is to continue to advance and grow. And if we're stopping that, then we are blocking the flow of water. We are the stagnant pools that are polluting the genetic memory and all that kind of stuff that will potentially build better worlds for all people on this planet, dog, irrespective of, you know, and this is where I get new age hipster shit on it, but it's true because I really do believe this by way of just philosophy in general, but specifically Nawa philosophy, that it could help create the better world that will allow for peoples for all over the world to appreciate, not appreciate, but rather enjoy this experience of life. Because ultimately, dog, I do believe it's beautiful and worth living. There's a lot of bullshit in between it. You know what I mean? A lot of it on our own end that we got to work through, right? It's hard because, you know, we don't want to address our shortcomings, but ultimately it's necessary not only for our own interpersonal relationships, but for us to, you know, and also for us to manifest our purpose here on earth, but ultimately, most importantly, to build that world that our fucking future ancestors deserve. Authenticity, I guess, dog, realistically, like in the most existential sense that I've been talking about on this podcast before with Heidegger, that's basically what I'm trying to say here, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, dog, if you were authentically a Chicano living in Japan, more power to you, homie. But, you know, that's just one fucking small example. I do it all the time too, dog. I fucking, you know, LARP all kinds of shit that I'm trying to be mindful of because I recognize that what that is it's just another barrier that's keeping the water from flowing authentically through me and helping me actually live my fucking purpose, essentially. You know what I'm saying? I've been caught up in so many different things that I fucking fashioned myself to be. I'm a jiu-jitsu person, I'm a college professor, I'm a X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm actually not any of that. That's just things that I enjoy to do, that are hobbies that I enjoy to do, which don't have to be monetized, by the way, because fuck capitalism. What I am is this person who's creating this message in hopes that it inspires within others the ideas that helps reveal to them the truths that are similar to this one. And anything that isn't fucking, helping with that is, me being disingenuous with myself, which is why I continue to be like, are you a Chicano in Japan? Cool, more power to you. But if not, like, what are you really, dog? Because that's the reason, if you really want to apply this ancestral knowledge, that's the reason why we're here. You know what I mean? We're here to discover that purpose and then manifest it, as I've already stated multiple times, right? So yeah, I guess that's about as good a point as any to wrap this bitch up. This is the first one back in 2 months, so that was just trying to get my feet wet, right? Trying to get my feet back into the water slowly but surely of this podcasting game, and continue to share with you all, hopefully, more of the insights that I hope that resonate with you in a way that the ideas that inspired this episode resonated with me, right? And until then, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.